every day we learn something new around here, or at least I do. I mean, yesterday, had you asked me, say, Colin, what's the worst, most left-leaning, most blinkered, blindfolded news service out there? I would have said, oh, that's easy. Reuters. I can spot a piece of Reuters copy from a long way away. I mean, if we had, it's almost like, if we had a contest, like what's that old musical show, Name That Tune. If you start reading a piece of copy from a wire service, it'd be interesting to to see how many words it would take somebody to say, oh yeah, that's Reuters. And so and ditto for the daily newspapers. If you start reading a newspaper and it's really a shallow story with lots of liberal cliches packed in up front with all these assumptions that they just blow right by and hope you'll not question them, then you'd have to say, well, you are reading a Gannett newspaper. Of course, every once in a while, I don't really read it, but every once in a while I see something from my little hometown Gannett newspaper that I used to carry before it was owned by the Gannett, when I was a paper boy. And so there was a story about these, I call them ATM machines, but it's these traffic cameras, they catch you going through an intersection if the light turns red. And so then there's one a few blocks from my house, you kind of take a left and a right, and all of a sudden you're on a main drag, and this is, if you're standing at a traffic light, these things are just blinking all day long. It's like cha-ching, cha-ching. So the local paper did a story on it, and lo and behold, they found that the people going through the traffic light got caught on camera, got the tickets. Well, they were black. Then, digging deeper and deeper and deeper, they found that the majority of the people who were not showing up to pay those tickets, who had a warrant on them, they were black too. This, of course, was the subject of a very intense news story and also an editorial. And here's where they get the prize for being the worst editorial ever, where the editorial writer reminded us that the cameras are racist. Catching black people breaking traffic laws is racist. And so that's what you see in Gannett. That's what we're going to see in this story here out of the McClatchy news service, and which basically puts Reuters and Gannett to shame. Let me read you the headline on this. This is a story from just a couple days ago. Hate groups are about to find lawmakers eager to scrutinize them. Now, it's a picture of Peter King and this new congressman, or new congressional chairman out of Mississippi, Benny Thompson. Anyway, let's read the copy. Dateline Washington. For years, Republicans have watched white supremacists claim the Republican Party is on their side. And on Capitol Hill, Republican lawmakers did little to crack down on race-based hate groups. But now, Democrats are in charge of the House, and that means Benny Thompson, a black Democratic congressman from Mississippi, is in charge of the House Homeland Security Committee. He plans to act. Thompson intends to hold hearings on what experts say is a growth of right-wing extremism in America. There are some people I understand who have belonged to these groups in the past, so there might be an opportunity for dialogue, said Benny Thompson. Several terrorism experts say attention to the issue is long overdue. They say the government has largely ignored the growth of violent far right that exploded into the public consciousness with the explosion of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on 1995 by Timothy McVeigh, an anti-government extremist. Quote, for all the intense focus on preventing terrorism, there's been a large blind spot about terrorism from the far right, said a former FBI agent and a fellow at New York University's Brennan Center for Justice. And the story just goes on and on and on. I think it gets around to mentioning that story in Charlottesville. So we got a story in 1995, a story in 2017. That's a pattern, people. Let's get on it. But of course, I mean, I mean, this guy tosses around these terms as if they have actual meaning. He tosses these terms around in such a broad stroke that we all know what a right-wing hate group is. That is anybody that does not go along with the liberal orthodoxy as expressed by the Black Caucus, which is black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why white people are white conservatives and really hate groups in disguise were roaming the country, attacking black people wherever they can. And so far, it's all been pretty successfully covered up. The philosopher says the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So when guys like this reporter, what's his name? This guy, I just looked him up. His name's Douglas. Let's see, what's his name? William Douglas. William Douglas is the congressional correspondent for McClatchy newspapers. And he is, of course, a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. And his also one of his things is he's into hockey. So he runs a blog about black people in hockey. Hey, that's his thing. Whatever. Anyway, but the philosopher says the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. And really, I don't like to get semantical here, but this word racism, I mean, there's different degrees of it. And it's a word that of course, it's something that people study all the time. But before you study it, you got to be able to put your finger on it and say, well, what is a racist? Or people are going to have trouble studying it. So whenever you see a study that says something like, well, people who own guns are 97% more likely to be big fat racist pigs, said a study from Smith University in the state of Smith. When you pull the threads on that study that's connected to racism, when you pull the threads and keep pulling and pulling, you're always going to find a footnote way down at the bottom that uses the expression symbolic racism. Because if you go up to somebody on the street and you say, you're a racist, people like me are going to go, oh no, I try to take people as I find them. But at the same time, I don't really let anybody bully me into saying that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. Good old Colin calls that the greatest hoax of our generation, the greatest lie of our lifetime. That's so they have a problem. I mean, how are we going to put our finger on these big bad people like Colin and give them the label we know they deserve, but they just won't put on themselves? Here's how they solve that problem. They ask you to take a test. It's called the symbolic racism test. And this is how they plumb your inner feelings so you can get in touch with your inner clan member, so they can figure out just how bad of a person you really are. So remember my definition of racism, which is black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism or hostility all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. That's called critical race theory. Keep that in when you're answering these questions here, these 6 questions I'm about to give you. Keep that in your mind. That's what they're looking for. Okay, the first question. And again, this is something they give at universities all the time. Give you a couple questions in your ID. Okay, here's a question I want you to answer. You're going to agree or disagree with these. It's really a matter of some people not trying hard enough. If blacks would only try harder, they could just be as well off as whites. Your 4 choices: strongly agree or disagree. If strongly agree or disagree, somewhat agree or disagree. So that's 4 choices. Here's another question. Irish, Italian, Jewish, and many other minorities overcame prejudice and worked their way up. Blacks should do the same. Some say black leaders, here's another question, some say black leaders have been trying to push too fast. Others feel they haven't pushed fast enough. What do you think? Are they pushing too slow, too fast, or like Goldilocks? Just right. You see where this test is going, correct? How much of the racial tension that exists in the United States today do you think blacks are responsible for creating? None, some, most, all. 4 choices. How much discrimination against blacks do you feel there is in the United States today, limiting their chances to get ahead? A lot, some, a little, none. Another question. Generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. Agree or disagree, strongly or somewhat? 4 choices. Over the past few years, blacks have gotten less than they deserve. Agree or disagree? 4 choices. Over the past few years, blacks have gotten more economically than they deserve. Agree or disagree? Do you own a gun? Yes or no? What is your race? Those are the answers, okay? So those are the questions. To the extent that any of your answers disagree with the concrete fact that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere, that explains everything. If you get away from that on any of these questions, then you're going to be pushing yourself on the scale right into that direction of being labeled a racist. If you think black people have opportunity today, well, you don't really recognize the racism that makes you a racist. If you think affirmative action is not good, that makes you a racist. If you think other minorities should be a model for black people, that makes you a racist. And so that's the definition. What a broad definition. That is a definition they use on college campuses and in newspapers. That's why clowns like this can so easily go around and throw out these terms as if they had some real meaning, when the only real meaning they have is some fantasy meaning inside of a college professor's cloudy head. Oh, by the way, this test is clearly for white people. Do you think there's a test that is kind of geared towards black people to see if they are racist? Colin, racism means you can only have to have power. And since black people don't have any power, it's impossible for them to be racist. Man, who was that guy with that crazy lisp? Anyway, that's one of the reasons I don't really use the word racist around here. Like when in all my books and videos and podcasts and articles, I don't like stepping onto their little landmines. And the word racist is one of those landmines. If you step on it, all of a sudden, you're talking about one thing, and everybody's going to want to divert you to talk about, well, Colin, what's the definition of racist? You black people can't be racist. I don't do that. I just use the word racial. So I use the word racial hostility. So I can just go around this semantic thing, because I don't like getting hung up in semantics. That's a deflection. When we're talking about violence, maybe a little old lady that got clunked in the head, raped, and almost killed, like we had in San Francisco a couple times over the last few weeks by one of the fellas. I mean, that's what we need to focus on, not what little words you're going to try to dress it up with just so you can get us off the topic of this incredible level of black violence and criminality. And so when this guy, and by the way, that's the new chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security. The new chair of the House Judiciary Committee, what's his name? Nadal? He's basically doing the same thing. According to Reuters, here we go, Reuters, he's going to be investigating the drastic spike in U.S. hate crimes and whether federal investigators have wrongfully targeted racial and ethnic minorities instead of focusing on white supremacist groups. Wow. Let's read a little more of this. I mean, they just go on and on and on. And in the new Congress, this committee will examine the causes of racial and religious violence, assess the adequacy of federal hate crime statutes, and scrutinize targeted domestic surveillance of specific groups. Yeah, we're talking about Black Lives. I'm guessing he's referring to Black Lives Matter, the group that marches down the street in New York, chanting. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now. Ring a bell. Does it ring a bell when all these groups celebrate the killing of white people and cops? Does it ring a bell that during a Black Lives Matter rally in Dallas, Texas, 5 cops were shot, killed? I think like 9 were shot, 5 died. Isn't it weird how, that could happen at a meeting of Black Lives Matter and I don't know, they're kind of the Teflon group. Nobody really held them responsible. The President of the United States went to the cops' funeral. And he took that opportunity at the funeral of those 5 cops with their families right behind him to remind people that white racism is afoot here. You know it. You know it. White racism is afoot. And how else could we explain the fact that black people are killing cops in Dallas? White racism. Man. When you're in the middle of something like that, of course, all these families were shell-shocked as it is. And a lot of times whether it's something big or something small, a lot of times when people hear something that's really, really awful like that, what Obama said, what other people said, it takes a second or two to process. It takes a minute to process. It takes a day to process. You look around and go, hey, did the President of the United States just come to a funeral for 5 cops in Dallas and blame it on white racism? The fact that a member of Black Lives Matter at a Black Lives Matter rally shot those cops? Did he just say that? That can't be true. I better check with that because that would be just about the worst thing ever. The people, Black Lives Matter is not like the Kiwanis Club. By the way, they kind of disappeared, didn't they? I think somebody turned their spigot off, the money spigot. Or maybe they did get some money and they decided they had to get an office and they had to have groups and they had to spend a lot of time making flow charts and they don't really have time to get on the streets anymore. Whatever. You don't really see them anymore other than some reporter digs out somebody who claims to be them and they come out. They know when a reporter calls Black Lives Matter, it's like, okay, whatever your question is, I know what the answer is, that some white racist is responsible for whatever your question you're asking. That's the drill. They know it. Reporter knows it. You and I know it. And when you're a member of Black Lives Matter, it's not like you're a member of the Kiwanis Club or the Rotary. There's no membership list. They don't give you a little card. They don't stamp your hand like you're going into a bar. You just show up and go, hey, I'm the president of Black Lives Matter for the neighborhood of Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah, my name's Colin Flaherty. I'm the president. Yeah. Give me a camera. Put a camera on me. I'll talk. I'll represent the group. That's the way it works. And when people do that, they're not really shy about expressing how unhappy they are with white people and cops for always keeping the fellas down. They're not really shy about it. They're not shy about expressing their hostility, their wishes for violence. Good Lord, they're not shy on the street. They're not shy on Twitter. The only people who are shy about it are the people who run Twitter and removing their tweets when a black person on Twitter expresses racial hostility and his desire for racial violence. That's the only time people get shy, when it comes time to calling it out. YouTube, the same thing. We're going to get into that in a second. But let's stay on this. Let's stay on this new gig these congressmen are giving themselves. They're going to expose all this incredible level of white racism that have been picking on black people for no damn reason whatsoever. Black Lives Matter. Why are you picking on them? Why'd you ignore all those white racists out there? Haven't you ever taken the symbolic racism test? Do you have any idea how many white racists are out there? How many white supremacists are out there? In the world of this Benny Thompson and this Nadler guy, in their world, again, there's the Black Caucus point of view of relentless white racism, And anything that deviates from that means you are a white supremacist. In my world, in the real world, I mean, we have the Black Caucus, which is a race-conscious black view over here. Very common, very popular, very unexamined. And way on the left, and they're not equivalent either, but way out there on the left, you have this white supremacy thing where you have a couple of people walking around going, oh, white people are superior. That's why we should all, wear helmets on our head with horns sticking out of them and drink mead out of horns. Yes, and have our girlfriends wear ponytails. And watch the Vikings. Oh, I like the Vikings, so I can't say that. But in between that, isn't there a place where I think I occupy, which is, listen, I look at this black racial hostility, how enormously popular it is. I mean, if just because I don't like that, that doesn't mean I'm ready to join, the Vikings group and, spend my summers in Norway dreaming of, white Valhalla. I don't buy either one of those silly things. I just buy people doing what they can, taking one step, putting one foot in front of the other, living day by day. And if somebody puts their hand out to me, I will accept it. But if somebody looks me in the eye and says, I don't like you because, Colin, you're a big, bad person, and I know that because you don't accept, you flunked the symbolic racism test, you are a bad person, I am going to do whatever I can to hurt you personally, professionally. I mean, I pay attention to that. Absolutely, I pay attention to that. I call it out whenever I can. That's what's happening here. So we got these congressmen going, oh yeah, we're going to get to the bottom of this white racism thing. Where are you going to investigate? Well, 63 million people voted for Trump. That'll be a good start. They're all a bunch of violent racists. Man, isn't it amazing how many videos we've seen of just white kids or white people wearing a Trump hat or having a Trump bumper sticker? They're attacked, they're threatened. People steal things from them. They throw drinks in their face. And how often that's a black person doing that. And then all of a sudden, when you bring that up, there's always somebody, Benny Thompson, this writer, or this congressman, or this writer, William Douglas, or the congressman Nadler. They're going to say, well, white people do it too, Colin. Did you see that video? There's a video of like 70-year-old, 80-year-old dude punching a black guy at a Trump rally. It's all equal. It's 1,000 examples of the fellas attacking Trump people. Got 2 examples of Trump people attacking a black person. 2 equals 1,000. Yeah, that's part of the symbolic racism test too. Do you believe in mathematics? If you answer that yes, that pushes you into the white racism part of the spectrum. And so, I mean, these congressmen, they're just making up these fairy tales as they go on. I mean, there's one part, you're making up these fairy tales. This one thing that Nadler says, which I would love to hear more about. He talks about how hate crimes have jumped 17% in 2017. Man, it's really hard to get it. It's really hard to get a hate crime charge leveled against one of the fellas who's attacking a little old lady or a kid or something like that. Even if they say, hey, I do not like you, Whitey. But it says anti-Semitic attacks spiked 37%. I tell you, we've done a lot of stories about black on Jewish violence, whether it's in Williamsburg, New York, whether it's out in Los Angeles, lots of places in between. That black guy who's identified as a teenager who sent all these robocalls to Jewish community centers around the country, threatening them. All these people that had all these rallies protesting against white supremacy, big bad white people. It was a big fat hoax. And so we got the the judicial wing of the Democratic Party in the person of Nadler and Benny Thompson. They're going to do whatever they can to draw attention to the greatest lie of our generation. They're going to perpetuate the greatest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization. But while they do that, The reality of it is black crime and violence is proceeding apace wildly out of proportion. Why don't we listen to just a couple things that came into my email just within the last hour or two. They might almost seem trivial, but the fact that they seem trivial tells us how desensitized we are to some very nasty bits of business. Why don't we start at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, in downtown Philadelphia, where people walk around willy-nilly, where the rich, liberal white kids in the daytime, they walk around in their classes all safe and sound as they listen to their professors lecture them about white privilege, about white racism and how it's inflicted on black people all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. They're eagerly taking the notes down. They're congratulating themselves and each other for their level of discernment and seeing through to this incredible truth that we know is the greatest lie of our generation. That's what they do in the daytime. In the nighttime, they walk around, and every single one of these white kids is a target for the fellas that lurk right off campus, just like this.
New at 11, armed robbers targeting college students near Penn's campus. The main item they want, iPhones.
And the crooks are making students do one thing before giving up the phone to help cover their tracks. NBC 10's Drew Smith talked to students about this crime spree. He joins us live now in University City. Drew.
And there's a pattern here that police say began at the beginning of the month and has continued, the same guys making the same demands. It's a cautious walk from the car to an off-campus apartment for students like Dominic Policare.
I've been living down here for a couple of years now, and it seems like every other week you're getting an alert about a robbery or someone's on the loose or the cops are looking for somebody.
Oh, here we go.
Elizabeth Monet showed us the latest alert from Penn Public Safety, describing armed robbers demanding iPhones and money from 46th to 50th Streets between 7 and 10 in the evening.
I know sorority rush and stuff is going on right now, so there's definitely a lot of people out late and targets.
Police say these two young men aren't just going up to people, grabbing the phones and running off. Instead, instructing them to go into the phone menu, disabling the passcode, and in the Find My iPhone app, forcing them to put in their logins and disabling it, all while facing a gun.
I would probably forget my password and I don't know, freak out, but yeah, it's definitely scary.
There are plenty of targets with so many people walking around with earphones in and devices in hand.
Why don't we go out to Las Vegas for a few more examples? The fella's just cruising in a car near a school so they could find a couple of white kids carrying iPhones that they can rob with a gun. Wow. How do you think these robberies go down? How do you think when there's a gun involved, when the gun goes off, do you think the gun goes off because the person gets out of the car going, I'm going to kill that person? Or does somehow the gun just go off because the person is so freaked out they use the gun and kill him? See, I'm just saying that when I'm just bringing this up, not to excuse anybody, but to remind everybody, when there's a gun involved in a robbery, how volatile that situation is, how anything could have happened. And if you're a victim of a fella putting a gun in your face, that's about as close to attempted murder as you're going to get, whether the gun goes off or not. Anyway, let's listen to a few stories out in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada.
Tonight after 3 Valley teenagers stare down the barrels of guns robbed on their way to school.
2 attacks hit just days apart in a neighborhood near Lake Mead and Hollywood on the far east side of town. New at 6 News 3's Kelsey Thomas has been talking with one of those young victims. Kelsey, he's just 14 years old.
Only 14 years old, and this whole thing happened just down the street from his own home. That robber attacking him as he walked to O'Callahan Middle School, robbing him for his cell phone.
It's not every day that you see a car slowly go up to you.
It was a moment that left Blake Barnes shaken. The unmistakable sign someone was following him.
The car door opens and a guy comes sprinting out of it. I turn around and sprint back and run towards a house nearby and scream as loud as I could so someone could hear me. He tackles me puts me on the ground and tells me to give up my phone.
The quick-thinking 14-year-old gave up his cell phone.
Then after that, I see a gun in his hand, in his right hand.
It happened this morning near Hollywood and Lake Mead. Walking to O'Callahan Middle School, Blake knew exactly what to do thanks to his dad, Steve Barnes.
I'd rather bury the cost of a phone than bury my child.
Steve says a similar attack happened last Friday. The school district confirming 2 kids from the same school were robbed of a cell phone as they walked to class. In Blake's case, surveillance video could pinpoint a suspect. The bad guy captured on a security camera, driving a white Kia Soul.
It's sickening. It's actually almost hurtful.
An attack on this quiet street in East Las Vegas, around the corner from Blake's home. Tonight, he has a message for the bad guy.
Why would you rob a 14-year-old or someone younger than you? How would your parents feel if they saw you doing that?
Outside of a recent robbery you'll only hear on 3. New video into our newsroom showing the car officers believe robbery suspects used when they robbed 3 students at gunpoint just hours ago. And one of those robberies happened near Maryland and Oakey. That's where News 3's Renee Santos joins us live. And Renee, you spoke exclusively with one of those young victims.
Marie, as you can imagine, some very intense and scary moments for that teen. He tells me he was just walking down the street when someone suddenly got out of a car and pointed a gun at his chest.
I see the door open and it was just like, oh, it's happening.
Dylan Swin was just walking.
And they just looked like they were ready to take a left turn.
When his morning took a dangerous turn near Bracken Avenue and 17th Street.
I see the door open and he just rushed me with a gun.
Within seconds, he says a suspect was pointing a gun right at his chest, demanding him to give up everything he had.
They took my wallet, my phone, and my headphones.
Metro Police sharing this surveillance video of the suspects accused of robbing him. The suspects believed to be driving in a black Nissan sedan with tinted windows and no license plates. Investigators say the suspects also robbed 2 other teens at gunpoint near Alameda and Anchor Street, and another person near Pecos and Owens just hours before Swin was. He says his family is glad he's doing okay.
They're all happy that I'm just not injured or nothing happened to me.
And is hoping the community helps identify who these suspects are.
Just look out for them, make sure that we get them apprehended.
And so is anybody in Congress going to study this level of black criminality? How many Republicans are going to be sacrificed on this altar of racism before they figure out they better have a defense against this when they are inevitably accused of racism? They better have a defense better than, no, I'm not a racist. They better have a defense better than, my best friends are black. They better have a better defense than, I voted for, fill in the blank. Nobody cares. And Republicans are just being mowed down. All Republican activists and Republican elected officials are being mowed down all over the country just because they said something as not as artfully as they should have. Because I mean, just like the fellas that are lurking around these campuses, like at Penn, nearby Temple, waiting for a white student to leave the campus. When they rob them, when they put a gun in their face, they know they're going to get a phone, and they know the reporter's going to come along and say, well, we know what caused that robbery. It was the student wearing headphones. It wasn't the fellas targeting these white kids for robberies. No, it was headphones that caused that. And now we have the same thing with these elected officials. They're just being targeted by the same kind of people, lurking the same kind of way. You stray off the reservation. If you say one word in a spontaneous conversation and not the exact right order, if your eyebrow goes up, if you delete a comma, you are history. Oh, you want to take the symbolic racism test? Hey, what do you think of affirmative action? Do you think we should give black people a spot at the head of the line for no damn reason whatsoever? And put them at the head of the line in front of more qualified people? Do you think we should do that? You think that's okay? If you say no, boom. Everybody's at risk, and we have all these people in public that cannot do anything except cower when confronted with it. And the elected officials, the people in charge of the Republican National Committee or people in the White House, all they can do is say, well, we're going to do some black outreach and let black people know we have a better deal from them. So the Democrats have been promising them free stuff. No. They have to recognize they're going to get more free stuff from us. I mean, that's what Hillary and Bernie did when they ran. I mean, really, they just had a little road show. They would go from town to town, and the only thing they disagreed on really was who was going to give black people the most free stuff. Bernie, 50 million. Hillary, next day, 75 billion. Bernie, next day, 100. Hillary, day after that, 125. That's my final offer. Bernie, 150. 200 billion. That's the most I ever heard Hillary say. And now we got Republicans wanting to join in the auction just because they fear people like William Douglas of the McClatchy News Service, because they can't find corners they can cower into and escape quickly enough to. I mean, every single person in D.C., every elected official, white elected official around the country lives in fear of the day that they say the one wrong word at one wrong time. And here's the thing. People are so unused to having a plain discussion about race that everybody slips when they find themselves in one. We don't slip here. We don't give the clowns an opportunity to jump on us because we say something stupid. What we say here is considered, it's practiced, it's true. We don't fall into their little semantic traps. We don't predict the future. We don't say people tend to do this. We don't say I suggest this. No, we say this is real. This is happening right now. That's why everybody freaks out about this page. We don't, we're in a way, we're kind of bulletproof. We stick to facts. We connect facts. And when we connect them with hard evidence. We don't connect them with fairy tales and fanciful suggestions. For years. All right, why don't we take a break here for a second from our initial segment? Why don't we do a little commercial break for good old Colin? Let me see. So normally at this time I say, hey, have you got my t-shirts yet? Have you seen them? Go to colinflaherty.com. You'll see a thing that says merchandise. Click on that. That'll take you to a link on Teesprings, teespring.com, where you'll see I've got these t-shirts, cups, hoodies. I've got all these cool designs on them. Like one says denial, deceit, delusion. Another says racism. Any conservative winning an argument with the liberal. What's another one say? White girl bleed a lot. And I got a couple different denial, deceit, delusion things. I've got one, a coffee cup with a red pill on it. The red pill that said friend of Colin, FOC. So a lot of cool stuff there. This is just one way you can support what we're doing around here. I mean, some people support these podcasts, my videos in lots of different ways. It's amazing to me that, I know this is one of my themes now, but I'm always astonished at this. And I was just telling somebody this morning on the phone in California, that your viewers will tell you what you're doing right and wrong. I mean, the people that view and hear these podcasts and my videos and my articles, they know, especially the videos, they know what's right and wrong on a video. They'll say, okay, Colin, your intros were too long. 8 seconds is too long. Nobody's going to stick around for that. So I said, okay, great. I was doing the 8-second intro. Pushed it down to 2. Bam, people liked it. And so people instinctively knew that when we got kicked off of YouTube, that was a big hit. I tried to pretend that it wasn't because I don't like giving aid and comfort to people who are trying to destroy us and our point of view. I don't even like calling it a point of view either. It's not a point of view. It's a collection of facts. But that was a big hit. Really hurt our ability to produce these videos, to write articles, to do books. And so people, when that started happening, I remember somebody said, "Hey, Colin, what's your Patreon?" I said, "What the hell's a Patreon?" They go, "No, that's where people give you money every month. $1, $1, $3, $5, $10, $25, $100. I said, "People do that? Really?" "Yeah." Yeah, I put up a Patreon. Yeah, they did. Anyway, that was up for 6 months. It was going real well. So I got a one line from Patreon. "Mr. Flaherty, you're violating our standards against hate speech. We're terminating your account." Boom. No appeal, no this, that. No, we might have misunderstood. No, you can call us and help us figure it out. Bingo, bing, bam, boom, you're gone. And so right after that, people said, "Okay, Colin, we're going to contribute to your channel on PayPal. PayPal.me/Flaherty457. PayPal.me/Flaherty57. 457. And now people do that. That's a way we're keeping these things going. Our next story is going to be about, it's going to give us an insight into how desperate, into how eager, into how widespread the efforts are to quash conservatives or alternative points of view. How desperate they are. And the only way we can fight what I'm about to tell you, it's not going to be to grab Google and put them in a headlock and throw them on the mat and, take care of business there. No, they're too big for us. That might happen. I hope it does. I hope the new Attorney General looks at them and says, "Oh, you guys are so violation of so many antitrust protocols. We're going to cut you down to size because we just cannot have you targeting conservatives and putting them out of business." No, that's about as abusive as it gets. I'm doing these videos from the great and podcasts from the great state of Delaware. And when you grow up in Delaware, you hear these stories about basically the company that was started in Delaware, the DuPont family. They came to Delaware to put their mills, their powder mills, at the banks of a river called the Brandywine River, because the Brandywine River had some of the highest change in elevation of any river in the country. And so the river went by quickly. And so that really powered the mills, these big stones. Right? And you could see, by the way, they have a museum down there, so you could see how these stones just turn and turn and turn. And they helped them ground the powder finer and finer. And that made good gunpowder. That was the beginning of the DuPont company, which, for good 50, 60, 70 years had basically had a monopoly on gunpowder in the world. I think they made $1 or $2 doing that. And so, but by the time 1910, 1905, 10, 15 rolled around, Teddy Roosevelt and lots of other people, they looked at all the success that was going on and they said, "Well, you guys have too much money and you flash it around too much. That's not good. We're going to take you down." So they split the DuPont company up into a whole bunch of stuff. They made DuPont's divest themselves from GM. They made them divest themselves from this or that. They had investments. They virtually owned a lot of these big companies. They divested themselves into 3 different companies: DuPont, Hercules, Atlas for gunpowder. Tons and tons of stuff just split up, just like they split up some of these other big companies, the trust busters. The reason I mention this is because whatever abuses the DuPont company may have done, no one ever said they were out there trying to manipulate public opinion to squash a point of view. No one ever said that. Whatever DuPont did, it's not 1% of what Google and YouTube and other people and Facebook and Twitter are doing to squash conservative points of view. Not even close. So when I saw the headline in the paper this morning saying, the Attorney General saying, "We may have to take a look at that," wow, that was fantastic. So let's keep an eye on that. But as we do keep an eye on that, let's just remember this isn't going to happen for a while. And whether it's talking about me or Jesse Lee Peterson or a lot of other people who are just keeping these things going by the grace of God and the grace of their subscribers, their friends, this is the way it's going to have to be for a couple of years if this is what you want to see and hear. So something to think about, and I'm grateful for all the help I get, whether it's $1 after somebody listening to a podcast. Sometimes people are very generous. They kick in, $50, $100 every once in a while, and all this adds up. It helps keep this going, and so I'm very grateful for that, and I'm very grateful to be in this with you. Let's get going out to see what Breitbart's up to. So this is a story from Breitbart a day or so ago, and it seems like Breitbart's running one of these stories every week now about something that comes out of Google, which is and their YouTube. They're the same. To me, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, PayPal, Patreon, especially Patreon, other people like that, I mean, they're all part of the same mindset. It's like they're part of the hive. I call it their hive mind. And they're all, well, let's just see what Google's up to. Smoking gun, says Breitbart. Google manipulated YouTube search results for abortion, Maxine Waters, David Hogg. And if we read the article, they really go into a lot more search results that they manipulated, all from the exact same point of view. Why don't we just blow through a little bit of this article? Quote, in sworn testimony, Google CEO Sundar Pichai told Congress last month his company does not manually intervene on any particular research result. Yet an internal discussion thread leaked to Breitbart reveals Google regularly intervenes in search results on its YouTube platform, including a recent intervention that pushed pro-life videos out of the top 10 search results for abortion. So they put the word abortion on what they call a blacklist for controversial YouTube queries. That means they actually have real people, a lot of them apparently, going into the Google algorithm and changing the Google algorithm to manually give you results that they want you to have. So if you Google abortion, you're not going to have some pro-life person who says, hey, before you do that, don't you really think you should really think about what you're doing? No, what you're going to get is some other person, like I saw just the other day. Where was this? On Yahoo, where they did it. I saw this on Fox, where a woman was explaining to these 8-year-old kids about her abortion, how great it was, and how her abortion was part of God's plan. Wow. Anyway, that's the kind of point of view that Google was really aggressively pushing on us. They also had they also changed the results for search terms related to terms like the Irish abortion referendum. They changed results for Maxine Waters, and they changed results for a kid named David Hogg. He's an anti-gun activist. I think he's one of the kids that went to that Parkland High School down there in Florida. And as you go through this article, you really kind of get a hint as to how massive this thing was. I mean, this whole, look how the trivial way it started too. So it started because I think it was just a few months ago, a writer from Slate. We've had experiences with Slate, a liberal magazine. According to this internal Google document, she had complained and saw that different search results. She complained about the word abortion and how she's getting all this anti-abortion material in her search results. So Google went in there and changed it. And she actually wrote him a letter saying, hey, thanks. I just noticed everything's different now. They downranked videos from a guy named Dr. Anthony Levatino, who used to be an abortionist. Now he got out of it and he said, oh my God, what was I doing? They downranked people like Ben Shapiro, who was considered a pro-life conservative. And so the person from Slate said that was dangerous misinformation. And Google said, oh yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, can't have that out there. Now all this, and I think the point about the big thing about this Breitbart story is that it's not just about abortion. They give you a list. They give us a partial list of all the terms. They even have a name for it. It's called the YouTube. The internal name for this is the YouTube Controversial Query Blacklist. And they only gave us a partial listing of the blacklist, and it talks about Russian plane crashes, David Hogg, and Florida shooting, but each one is numbered. So the ones I just gave you were numbered 2,117 to 2,135, I think. It's like 18. And 18 of them. What really begs the question, what was in the other thousands of blacklisted queries that preceded this? What was in the other thousands of queries that may have been on the other end of this? On the back end of this? Anybody that knows anything about Google, this is not a conspiracy. It was 5 or 6 years ago when I was writing for WND. Google sent WND a letter. Yeah, a real piece of paper. That's how Stone Age that was, saying if you let Colin Flaherty continue to use terms like black mob violence, we will not allow Google advertising on your website. Now, when you see ads on a web page, chances are they're Google ads. They are the king. So to say that you're not going to allow Google ads on your site is to say we are going to put you out of business if you keep letting Colin Flaherty tell the truth about this ridiculous level of black crime and violence that so many reporters and public officials are in denial about. Not once did any of the Google brainiacs, the smartest people in the world, almost by definition, smartest people in the world, not once did any of them say, oh, hey, Colin, you got that wrong. It's not happening. Or white people do it too. Or white people deserve it, Colin. Nobody even said that. Because this whole idea of black victimization, it's a religion now. It's a religion that you just don't challenge. It's like going into a Catholic church, I guess, and saying, hey, I don't really believe in that Holy Communion thing. I just don't think it's happening. If you said that on Google, they would let you sit. You could say, hell, you could say that all night and day. But if you say the equivalent of that in the real world, Google's going to shut you down in YouTube. And that's exactly what happened to me. But there's a lot of different ways to shut a person down or an idea down. A lot of different ways they can try. They can take it out of the search results. They can stop putting it in the suggested videos. They can refuse your ads for it. These are real life things, changing the way people think about real life dangerous things. So when I pick up the paper this morning and I see people talking about Trump and his collusion with Russia and how the Russians are intervening in our elections, I was thinking, man, whatever the Russians did, they're just a needle in the haystack. The haystack is Google and YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, the hive mind, suppressing conservative points of view, suppressing alternative points of view, not necessarily connected to elections, but even more basic than elections, affecting the way everybody thinks about these really basic things that we see every day. Boy, that's way more dangerous than somebody in the Kremlin, in the basement of the Kremlin with a couple of computers typing up fake websites. So anyway, man, Breitbart is doing so much important work on Google. I think my favorite Breitbart story they did so far, you guys ought to go find this. You know what? I ought to just put this up as a podcast. It's about an hour. Right after the election. If you didn't see this, you got to go track this down on Breitbart. It's Breitbart Google company meeting post-election. See, there you have all the top 4 or 5 muckety mucks at Google. And they're in a room. There's a couple of thousand people in this room, the hive mind. But everybody's watching it around the world. And it was like some kind of a therapy session / encounter group, because everybody was doing the collective grief, the collective what the hell just happened to us after the election of Donald Trump. They were very explicit about it. Nobody was hemming, hawing. Nobody was dancing around talking in code. The election of Donald Trump was a disaster that they had to figure out how to prevent that kind of crap happening in the future. Because there was only one way that Donald Trump got elected, because we didn't do a good enough job in telling people our truth, exposing people to our truth, and keeping out the lies for people like Colin and Donald Trump. This is their truth. And and we never would have known that had Breitbart not grabbed this video and let us see it for ourselves. Admit it. I'm telling you this right now. This is the biggest, baddest company in the world, Google. Do you believe what I just said the way I said it? Somebody told me that, I wouldn't. I'd say, okay, well, I don't believe it. I don't disbelieve it. But I do want to hear it. Go find it. It's easy to find. This would be the craziest 30 to 45 minutes you ever spent in your life. Really, really will. It's like, wow, these are the people who are controlling the information on the entire planet now. Look at them. Look at the responsibility we have abdicated to them. Listen to them. Look at the people in the audience. Every single person sitting in that audience is basically one step away from living in his mom's basement and eating Twinkies. But there they are at Google, contemplating what you and I and everybody else should know and shouldn't know about every issue important to conservatives, about abortion, about guns, about affirmative action, about racial violence. They're on a mission. Their mission is to marginalize us, to stop us. And that's why we're only going to win if we figure out that we're going to have to support people out there on the front lines of this. That's my oblique way of saying, hey, thank you for going to my PayPal and dropping a few coins in good old Colin's cup. Why don't we finish this podcast up on, I don't want to call this good news, but it's actually some surprising news. When I first started writing about this whole racial violence thing, one of the first kind of stories that popped out at me was how much of this is happening, how much black violence is happening in schools, chocolate schools, and how many people were in such denial, deceit, and delusion about it. And then I remember reading something from, I think it was Investors Business Daily was the first one I saw write about it, about, hey, this isn't a coincidence. The Obama administration has put out rules, and the story you're about to see, it says 2014, but these guys were all ruled up long before 2014. They were kind of like ready to go from day one of the Obama administration. This is something we talked about tremendous amount, we still do, about how when the Obama administration came in, they sent out people from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. They visited school districts all over the country. They probably went to your school district and they looked at the numbers and they said, hey, you have an enormous disparity between black students and white students in discipline and performance. And there's only one reason for that. That's white racism. And the administrators would just sit there and shake their head yes. That's all they could say. Did you ever hear of a teacher, a principal, a school board executive being fired for agreeing with that? Never. But there's only one pushback on that. The pushback is, oh yeah, black people in our district, in our schools, are misbehaving in that disproportionate amounts. 9 to 1, 10 to 1, 25 to 1. That's how bad it is. Do you think if you were a school board superintendent, do you think you'd have your job if that's what you said in public or in private? No, you would not. That's the truth. So all over the country, teachers were going, I cannot discipline a black student anymore, or else I'll be in trouble. Guess what? The fellas and their lovely ladies in schools figured it out. A lot of other people figured it out in the Trump administration over the last 2 years, so they basically yanked this policy. Let's go to a story down in Atlanta where they're kind of giving us a soft-coded version of the results of getting rid of this ridiculous race-based policy.
Minority students by limiting suspensions. That's part of a federal policy that local schools have had to follow since 2014. And last month, the Trump administration got rid of that policy. And reporter Tina Terry talked to some local educators who fought for that change.
Yeah, those former CMS employees went all the way to Washington, D.C., some of them fighting to have that policy repealed. And today they told me this decision to repeal it will keep your kids safe. Annette Albright will never forget this day in 2016. She says she was attacked by students at Harding High. Some, she says, had a history of discipline issues.
Look at that video, and it's still unbelievable that it happened.
She says a discipline policy implemented during the Obama administration created an environment where students were in control.
I would have kids to tell me, you can't suspend me.
The 2014 policy aimed to make sure minority students weren't unfairly punished because of their race. It encouraged schools to seek alternatives to suspending and expelling students.
It was strictly, if you don't get suspension rates down, you're not getting federal funding.
Albright and other local educators testified in D.C. about the policy. Now a directive by the Trump administration has repealed the policy. It quotes a local educator who said the policy makes school staff less likely to refer matters to law enforcement. But critics of the change say minority students could suffer. Data from 2018 shows there were 10,129 suspensions in CMS through October. More than 7,000 of those students were black, about 1,600 Hispanic. But Albright says the old policy wasn't the solution.
By removing this policy, what you're doing is you're giving back the power to the superintendents and the principals in the district.
And federal officials say that the Department of Justice should continue to enforce the Civil Rights Act in order to protect students from discrimination.
So at the end, Tina Terry, I love doing podcasts, but sometimes you do need to see the video on this. If you want to look up the video, look up this headline. Policy protecting minority students by limiting suspensions scrapped by Trump administration. There's a reporter there named Tina Terry, a black woman. She's basically in pain now. And at the end, she reminded everybody that, well, don't forget, if your student's civil rights are being violated, go to the Department of Justice. Because everybody knows, no matter what the suspension is, no matter what Obama is, no matter what this crazy teacher just said about we lost the ability to discipline students, and now we have it back, that's going to be a good thing. This teacher wants you to know that black students, that teachers, especially white teachers, are always picking on black students for no damn reason whatsoever. That's the only reason they got suspended. You going to disagree with that? You're going to come out and say, no, black people in school are really violent, and break school rules wildly out of proportion. And as bad as the numbers are, the real numbers are way worse. How many stories have we done on that? How many hundreds of stories have we done on that? So we got a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. The people at the Department of Ed, there's so many weeds in this government now. And I can't tell if they're just trimming them back or pulling them out by the roots. But for 8 years, it's hard to really give people the big picture of how deeply and widely and completely the people in the Obama administration saw things through the lens of race. If you go out to the military academies, Annapolis, they were teaching the cadets about white privilege. If you go to the EPA, they're talking about environmental racism. If you go to the Department of Defense, every single contract, and this is it's easiest to find in the Department of Defense, all the contracts, you better have your affirmative action plan down. You better be able to explain to the Department of Defense how many black people are working on your projects, or you will be disqualified from competing to get those projects, whether it's a helicopter, an airplane, a missile, a gun, whatever. Department of Education. Totally race conscious. Total disaster. I mean, they planted these things deep. They planted them in a way knowing that somebody at some point was going to come along and try to pull the roots out. They knew that if they only trimmed them back, they'd grow back. And that's the challenge now. The Department of Education, do they pull this thing out by the roots, or are they just trimming it back a little bit? That's the challenge for every single department in the federal government. I don't know if other ones are meeting it, to tell you the truth. What did I hear? The other day there was a story, the University of Michigan said like, it's a crazy number of people working their affirmative action racial equity thing, like 50 people, that's all they do. They go around hunting for black people who are victims of relentless white racism. That's why we're doing these podcasts and the books and the videos. There's no pushback on any of this stuff. That's why I'm in a position to do it, because I've drawn a box around my life. There is no HR department that's going to tap me on the shoulder wondering what these crazy videos are about, and could you come with me and explain it in my office? Oh, by the way, pack your things. You won't be coming back to that cubicle. So I'm in a position to do it. Got the chops to do it. As I was a reporter for a long time, I broke tough stories, won a ton of awards. Hell, I got a black guy out of prison once. It was on Court TV. It was a big deal. His name's Kelvin Wiley. Look it up. So I've got the chops to do it. I've got the audience to do it now. So many people are so happy we're doing this. They're happy to be a part of it. Whether it's just sharing the videos, liking the videos, sharing and liking the podcasts, spreading them around to your friends, whether you post it on Twitter or you post it in your email, or you just tell your friends, hey, you got to hear this guy Colin. He's a guy that's telling the truth. Without racism, without rancor, without apologies. He's not afraid of anybody. He's not dancing around. He's not apologizing for anything. Man, I've been on so many radio shows in my life and other shows, TV shows, where you're with the host and they spend the first 10 minutes explaining what you're doing there and apologize for, in advance for anything anybody might say here. And the segment's only like 12 minutes long. 10 of it is spent apologizing. So anyway, I'm glad to be in this with you. It's interesting, but it's more than interesting. It's interesting to me, but the stakes are high for all of us. And again, I started this thing out as kind of a media thing, right? It was like, well, I'm going to expose these reporters who are in denial, deceit, delusion about this enormous problem of black criminality we have. Then all of a sudden it morphed into something else. So we not only have this exposing this liberal denial, deceit, and delusion, but we also have people use these videos to tell their moms, dads, sisters, brother, aunt, uncles, kids where you can live, where you can't live, how you can live your life in a safer fashion. And I get so much encouragement, and I'm so grateful for that. And we're going to keep going. We're going to keep making these podcasts. We're going to keep knocking on a lot of doors. We're going to, some open, some don't. Some close. Everyone closes, a couple more open. And one thing I know for sure about that That makes the black kids angry.